welcome to another amazing episode of Say It Online, where we help digital agency owners stop just randomly shouting into the void and start communicating meaningfully and effectively in this digital age. I'm your host, Say Gabriel, and this episode was brought to you by our sponsor, Nancy Content. If you're sick of conversion content being a huge pain in your agency's butt, especially websites, campaigns, etc., let's talk. With the smoothest content process ever, a team of unbelievably skilled and organized content strategists, and years of subcontracting experience, Anansi is looking to make your life as a digital agency owner unbelievably easier. Just head, if you're interested, to anansicontent.com, that's ANANSI content.com, and hit Let's Talk. And now, without further ado, here's our episode. Hello, everybody. I am super excited today to welcome Karl Sakas to the show. Agency growth is pretty good, well, unless it gets out of control. Karl Sakas helps agency owners increase their profits and reduce their stress by conquering growing pains. As management consultant and executive coach at Sakas and Company, Karl has personally advised hundreds of agencies on every inhabited continent. He's the author of Made to Lead, the In-Demand Marketing Agency, and more than 350 articles on agency management. When he's not helping clients, Karl volunteers as a bartender on an antique train. I met Karl actually a few weeks ago at a few weeks, might be a bit longer now, at Summit 2019 in Denver. Super excited to hear him as a speaker and super excited to welcome you to the show. Welcome, Karl.
Say, it's great to be here.
Now I have to say, your emphasis on conquering growing pains and everything that you talked about at the conference just really, really rang true for us. I'm sure lots of people can relate to growing pains, but that has definitely been the name of the game for us this year. But I'm super curious. Why don't you, tell us a little bit more about yourself? How did you come to this particular work?
Most recently, it was in an agency operations leadership role. I've worked in agencies as a project manager, director of client services, director of operations. And ultimately, I realized there was this gap where people start agencies because they love the work. Could be design, development, writing, strategy, PR. And then suddenly they find themselves running a business. And that wasn't really what they expected. And they're getting pulled away from what they really enjoy about the work. In my case, that just comes naturally. I grew up helping my family's small business. One of my grandfathers was a business professor for 40-some years. Parents were both career Army officers. The idea of leading businesses and getting things done and focusing on results has all just been normal since I was in elementary school. And so I feel really lucky that combining that experience between digital marketing since I was in high school as a web designer, to the agency operations leadership roles more recently, that I'm able to help people out. I really like it.
Awesome. I can definitely relate to that in terms of kind of being immersed in businesses in one form or another from the time that you were young. That's really cool. Now, at your recent talk at Summit, you mentioned something called the Agency Satisfaction Index, and that really resonated with me, and I think it'll really resonate for our listeners too. Can you kind of introduce for us what the heck that is?
Absolutely. And maybe to start by framing the problem. The problem is this. We talk in our industry, we talk a lot about client satisfaction. And that is important. If our clients are unhappy, they're going to leave, and that's not good for business. But I think we need to talk more about agency satisfaction. That
Heck
is,
yeah.
how happy are you as the agency or the service provider working with your clients? And in my work with clients, agencies today, and going back to starting as a web designer in the days of dial-up, there are ultimately 4 stages that we can think about in terms of agency satisfaction in your client relationships. And so I can summarize those stages, and then we can dig in on what they are, so you could identify, as you're listening, where you are today, and also how to make the jump from one stage to another. How's that sound?
That sounds excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So imagine, maybe a fuel gauge on a car, or a meter, or a gauge. On the kind of the empty end of the meter, that's the first stage. Your agency client relationship, things are powerless. Then it goes to overwhelmed, then it goes to confident, and then it goes to valued. Valued is like the full end of the gas gauge. And along the way, and we're glad to talk about how to make the jump. When you're powerless, things are pretty bad, right? It's like the clients are in charge. Whatever they say you need to do, you need to do. You're probably working at least 60 hours a week. Stressed out is so normal that the idea of not being stressed, it's hard to imagine. And also you feel like you can't fire a client because everything is just really going going nuts. So, and you're also probably delivering out of scope work, and it's just no fun. The good news is there is hope. You can move from powerless to merely overwhelmed. Now, overwhelmed doesn't sound great, right? But at least you now have some power in the relationship. Your hours are down somewhat. You'll sometimes push back on out of scope requests. Your team is complaining a lot about your clients, but there's probably not much you could do. And when you go on vacation, if you're in the overwhelmed stage, if you have a partner, they know that you are going to be on the phone, or your laptop most of the time.
Too real.
Yeah. And also, when you're in the overwhelmed stage, your agency is likely profitable, but probably below the 20 to 30% net margins benchmark that I recommend for a healthy agency. Now, there is hope. You can go, we've got powerless, overwhelmed. You can go from overwhelmed to confident. Confident, imagine that's halfway on the fuel tank, the fuel meter. Confident is when things start feeling a lot better. And this is a stage that most agencies and agency owners seek to achieve. So when you are a confident on the agency satisfaction index, clients ask you for advice. They tend to be fairly responsive when you ask them for things. You feel okay if a client sends you a bunch of requests at once. You feel okay asking them to prioritize rather than just saying, yes, we'll do all of that, and then panic and try to figure out how you'll do it later. You will sometimes still have some client stress, but it's more unusual. Your client renewal is pretty good, probably at least 80% annually renewal. If you are focused on retainers, if you're focused on projects, it's going to be a bit lower. And importantly, when you have made that jump from overwhelmed to confident, you feel safe disagreeing with your clients. At U Summit, we did some scenarios about clients making ridiculous requests. When you're in the confident stage, you actually feel comfortable pushing back. You may not always persuade them, but you're not quite as worried of like, they're going to fire me if I don't say yes to everything.
Yeah.
Sounds
is that
good,
the
right?
end? Yeah. That sounds pretty great. Is that the end?
Well, a lot of agencies stop at confident, and that's understandable. I mean, it's a nice place to be. But if you want to go a bit further, there's one more step on the agency satisfaction index, which is to go from confident to valued. Now, what does that look like? Well, clients are going to call you first for advice. You're hearing about their new initiatives early in the process, and they want your advice on them, rather than you're hearing at the very end, hey, we need this for this enormous event next week, and you're thinking, wait, didn't you know that was happening? Yeah, they ask you when they're planning the event, not a week before the event.
What a thought.
Because you're valued. Often they'll ask for advice in areas that go beyond your own expertise just because they know you have good advice and they figure you'll know someone who can help them out. Your renewals are probably 90% plus retainer-wise for the clients you want to keep. And often they'll voluntarily increase their budgets. I had a client earlier this week who said, yes, I'm on board to renew. He's doing executive coaching. And he also said, is there anything else we should be asking you about in terms of getting help? That's a valued scenario. You're not as stressed about clients. Maybe the stress is about, this year you're going to take, a 2-week vacation, maybe 3 weeks. Are you going to go to Bali or Fiji? Or maybe do 3 weeks and you go to both. And also when you tell clients that, maybe they're wrong about something, you could still be diplomatic. They actually want you to do that because that's part of your value. The fact that
Mm.
you will tell them the truth when maybe no one else around them will.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah. That's a powerful place to be in. That's when you can really make a difference as well.
yeah, and ultimately, the benefits to you are going to be unique to you and your agency, but ultimately, as you move up from powerless to overwhelmed to confident, and then if you want from confident to valued, your quality of life is going to improve.
Mm, awesome. Yeah. So I'm here. I mean, just this, I think, I'm sure if our listeners are anything like me, then they're already kind of mentally placing themselves or asking themselves which category they're in. Powerless, where you're totally at the mercy of bad clients, overwhelmed, where you have some power but are still, stressed and afraid a lot of the time,
Yep.
confident, when it sounds like that's a little bit of a tipping point where now all of a sudden, people are coming to you and you're really enjoying the work you do, the people you work with. But then
Yes.
there's valued, where you are that treasured specialist and resource, and you really have total kind of control over who you want to work with and what you want your life to look like. It sounds like, to a greater degree. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. And also, so you'll have situations where the client, mentioned the example of what else should we be considering as he works with his CFO to build
Hmm.
out
So
budget.
they're asking you what you can help them with and what they can spend money on, because it's such a win-win for them at that point. You have such a high value in their eyes. Is that?
Exactly. I started working recently with an agency in the Midwest in the US, and the way they framed it was, if we don't hire you, we're not going to hit our growth goals.
Ooh, that is a very that is a very valued spot to be in.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And here's another type of example on that. I have a client I've worked with for about 4 years or so, and uh, she'd reached out and said, I know I can't do one of your formal programs this year based on her budget, but she said, here's the budget I've got. Here's what I'd hope to get. Would that work? And so we're going to have a bit of back and forth about the scope, but ultimately there's no discussion about what the budget is. She's like, here's the budget. Like, what could we fit into that?
As opposed to, I think, people in the powerless and overwhelmed stages are probably quite familiar with people wanting a lot for their very small budgets and kind of demanding or expecting a lot more, perhaps, than they're able to actually invest in at that
It,
time.
exactly. And if you like, we can talk about what would it take to move up each step.
I would love to talk about that. But before we get into that, I just
Yeah.
have one question for you, Karl, which is, what are some of the things, for people who are self-identifying perhaps at the powerless stage or the overwhelmed stage, what are some of the things that might kind of keep you trapped there a little bit? What are some of those challenges or barriers you might have to overcome if you do want to move forward into the next stage?
Hmm. I've actually written about a concept I call the agency doldrums. This dates back to the days of sailing ships, in the
Mm.
15, 16, 17, 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that when a sailing ship was in the doldrums, it was a spot where there was no wind. So, if you're relying on wind to, power the sails, you could be stuck for days or weeks.
Mm.
And from a morale perspective, that's not good. From a supply perspective, not good. And
Mm-hmm.
also, you have no idea. I mean, there was no weather radar, then, so you have no idea when it's going to change. Crews would often mutiny after it, was lasting too long, and you could plan. There were certain spots around the equator where this was common, where the doldrums were common. So if that you had to go through there, you could bring extra supplies, this and that. But you know, it was a mix of random and predictable. Um, here are some agency doldrums that you might be experiencing if you're at powerless or overwhelmed. You might have a toxic employee you want to fire, but you can't because they're key to your biggest account.
Mm.
Speaking of biggest account, you probably have a client concentration problem. You have one client who is more than 20% of your business, and you feel like, they're problematic, but we can't get rid of them because, I'd have to lay people off.
Yeah, they're paying the bills. Yeah, I definitely have heard that from some of our partners before.
Yeah. The other challenge when you've got client concentration, you feel like, we really need to dial back our own marketing or sales efforts because, we don't have time. We couldn't say yes. I was just speaking with a client about this earlier today where they had slacked off on marketing. Initially she said about 3 months, and it was like, well, we're like 12 months, because they were focused on a lot of internal things. And the reality is, you want to find a balance. I recognize that, as a business owner, I can never stop marketing. No matter how busy things are, the moment you stop your own marketing, it's just going to start the clock ticking. Whether
Yep.
it's in your pipeline's dry in 6 months or 12 months, I don't know. People will reach out after hearing me speak at events, this year it's been anywhere from a year ago to 4 years ago. So imagine if I hadn't spoken at the event 4 years ago that got the inquiry now. Part of that's a mindset thing, just accepting, keep doing your marketing. Some other things that might make you feel, trapped in the agency doldrums, in powerless or overwhelmed. Your workload is 60 to 80 hours a week or more. There's not much room, right? That's tough. And maybe you've got a situation where a client is so past due, you're about to run out of cash, but you have to keep paying the team. So the idea of telling the client, we need to pause work for you, it's like, what if they go away completely, and then you might never collect the money? So it's ultimately a unique mix of situations. But, if you think about those agency doldrums situations, they tend to correlate to being in powerless or overwhelmed on the agency satisfaction index.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. All of these, none of these are new to me. Having a whale client, being too busy, simply too busy to even contemplate change. Having a key employee who's problematic, that's kind of the parallel to the whale client. Really,
Yep.
what I'm hearing from you here, Karl, is the rock and a hard place. Is that
Yes.
people in powerless and overwhelmed stages, that they're facing risks that are potentially scary, or almost certainly scary, but potentially, hugely impactful for the business. And, they are afraid to take that risk for fear of losing what they already have. So what are some of the things, if people are trapped in those doldrums, so to speak? And I love that analogy. I've heard the term the doldrums many times before, but I didn't realize that was the source of that. So so people are stuck in the doldrums, feeling overwhelmed, feeling like they can't change. Like, how do you overcome that? Is it like pure willpower? Is it, throwing yourself out onto the world? Is it great logistics? Share with us if you don't mind.
There's a specific strategy you can use for each step, to go from powerless to overwhelmed, overwhelmed to confident, and then confident to valued. And it's unique. We can talk about those. I would say, though, it's important to consider there are two mindset shifts that are vital.
Yeah, mindset's always huge.
One of those is, the stronger your pipeline, the easier everything else is.
That makes sense.
That's what, one of those simple yet powerful things. You can feel more confident about saying no to the client, or saying no to the prospective client who's not a fit. And you're noticing the red flags. You're like, let's wait a little bit longer because someone else is going to come along, or someone else is pending right now, or there are 3 people pending, and if even one of them moves forward, it's fine. I'm going to say no to them, kind of thing. So pipeline is vital regardless. The other mindset shift is around taking that risk. And for sure, it is easier to take risks when you've got cash reserves. It's easier to take risks when your pipeline is strong. It's easier to take risks if you're generally a risk-oriented person. But regardless of your particular situation, here's a way that I think about it. If we think about positive versus negative, and we think about certainty versus uncertainty, something that's been helpful for me, and in a sense, I am risk conscious, right? Having been a former project manager, I'm thinking about, well, what are the pros and cons, and what are the odds of this and the odds of that. Eventually, the thing that I found that helps me move forward if I've been stuck is that positive uncertainty outweighs negative certainty. That is, currently, whatever the certainty is, it's bad. It's not going in a good direction. It's negative. And there's some uncertainty out there, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I know it's going to be positive relative to where I am now. So I found that's helpful. Several of my clients have, where you finally decide, you know what, the positive uncertainty is better than this negative certainty.
Okay. Okay. So so just reflecting on that. So two things
Yeah.
there. One being quite simply, strong pipeline gives you more resources in many different ways.
Mm.
And I think there's some things we can dig in there as well. I definitely have a few questions around that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to, I don't want to forget really what you just said, which I think is beautiful and really, really resonant, which is positive uncertainty outweighs negative certainty. And
Yes.
if I'm understanding that correctly, that is to say, is if you know that you're miserable,
Hmm.
even though change might be scary, uh, there is opportunity there. Whereas, if you stay where you are, you're just going to continue to be miserable. And there's I can think of several other kind of perhaps over said quotes that say similar things, like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting things to change.
Yep.
And there was another one that was in my head just now that unfortunately has slipped away from me. But that I think that's really cool. And I think that saying that is a good way to remind ourselves, it does put the emphasis on that positive uncertainty. It kind of gives the miasma of the unknown a name and makes it a little bit more known because you're saying, hey, I'm not certain about it, but I trust in myself enough to make sure that the direction I'm going is going to be a positive one because I know that it's going to be different from where I am now. And I'm kind of in the driver's seat a little bit. I don't know if I'm reaching a little bit. Is this making sense?
It is. And you could think about it, whether it's, business related or in your personal life. I think, we all know people who maybe are in a relationship they know is not good for them, or maybe it's us, right? In the relationship. And it's like, if all your friends say that this isn't a good idea, there's probably some reason that they all think that kind of thing. So sometimes it's, getting outside perspective. And if ultimately the outside perspective is saying, from what you've described, the positive uncertainty makes sense. It seems like it's worth taking the risk. Sometimes you just need that outside perspective that we don't have. By definition, we don't have outside perspective on ourselves. I coach clients, but I have my own coach because I can't coach myself.
Mm-hmm. We always say you can't read the wine bottle, you can't read the label from outside the wine bottle.
Exactly.
Or from inside. Oh, I'm messing. I'm just getting all my words mixed up. You got it, though.
Yes. Yeah. So whatever analogy we need, but it's also worth considering, mindset wise, we're never going to be totally sure.
Yeah.
And ultimately it comes down to, I think about it as the fidelity level on decisions. Do you want a 99% or is it a 50%? How important is this? If you're trying to decide, which box or package of printer paper to get, that's a pretty low fidelity decision. You spend $25 on the box, and if you made the wrong decision, you just spend $25 on another. On the other hand, if you're trying to decide who is the next person to hire, and they will be, the third or the fifth or, even the 20th person at your agency, that's a pretty important decision, and you want to get that right. But don't spend the same amount of time trying to decide which brand printer paper to buy.
Yes, I'm somebody who is strongly affected by decision fatigue. And at the end of the day, I'm sure my husband could tell you that decisions like that, like where to eat or like what sort of paper to buy, become almost as weighty. He's like, how do you run a business? I'm like, I used all the energy on the big decisions in my business. That's it.
And just recognizing that is important. In college, a friend's dad was a general in the Marine Corps, and he was ultimately responsible for thousands of service members. And when he got home, he had no interest in making decisions about anything.
Yeah.
And, but
Yeah, I relate to that very strongly.
there we go. Well, do you want to talk about, we talked about the mindset piece, certainly around build your pipeline, accept that positive uncertainty is going to be better than negative uncertainty. I can share a specific strategy that'll help for moving up each step if you're
Yeah,
interested.
absolutely. I have endlessly
Yeah.
always more questions, but I'd love to dig into that because that may very well answer some of my questions and give the listeners a little bit more of a foundation from wherever we go from there. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And as a reminder, the four steps are powerless, overwhelmed, confident, and valued. I did an audience survey when I spoke at U Summit, and about 2/3 of the audience members recognized which step they were in now, which stage. And then I also asked, is this the stage you want to be in? In that case, I believe either no one or maybe one person out of the whole room raise their hand. So if you're not totally sure where you are, I can share the article where people can dig in a bit. And if you're not in the stage you want, that is totally normal.
Mm.
So say you want to go from powerless to overwhelmed. The strategy is ultimately about what I call strategic churn. That is, you are replacing your worst clients. The client who expects everything from you and doesn't like paying for anything and expects everything immediately. As long as they're around, it's going to be hard to escape powerless because they expect everything for nothing. Strategic churn is ultimately about intentionally replacing bad clients with good ones. So part of that is bring in good new clients. And then eventually, as your confidence level goes up, going to the bad clients and saying, it could be a range. It could be, in order for us to continue working together, based on our shift, this and that, your new fee would be this per month or this for the next project or, depending on how you're pricing it. You also may fire them outright. You might say, based on shifts in our agency's business, we're no longer a good fit for you. So we will, we can work with you through the end of, next month or something like that. And we recommend you start the process of finding a new agency. We can recommend some people. That's strategic churn, intentionally getting rid of the worst clients. The
Okay.
exact.
Oh,
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
I'm curious. So, how do you know where or where and what the quote unquote right clients are? I think some people have been trapped in the powerless stage for a long
Mhm.
time. I'm not sure if they're all aware how to identify who are the good clients and where to find them.
Well, I actually have a free tool that I can share for listeners for the show notes.
Thank
I
you.
call it the client rankings or ratings matrix. And the idea is that you put in every client and then you look at them in terms of two dimensions. You're looking at what is their current value and what is their future potential. So it could be high, medium, or low for each of those. The current value, part of it is financial, but also, maybe you've got a medium value client who is your biggest fan and they're constantly referring bigger clients to you. That's good. On the other hand, maybe you've got a client who's not spending much. Maybe they're lower current value. But importantly, you also want to look at what is their future potential. Maybe you have a medium value today client who, just got additional funding, or maybe some other change happened, they're about to invest more in their marketing and design and development efforts. In that case, maybe they're high future potential. On the other hand, you also might have a client who is high value now and they just got acquired, and that the acquirer's marketing team is going to be in charge now. In that case, they might be going from high to medium or maybe high to low. And so the idea is that when you load everyone in there, it'll even actually color code things based on the categories you choose. It'll give you ideas of which clients to focus on growing, which clients to keep as is, and which clients to fire or perhaps prepare to lose. So glad to share the link for that. And then I actually have an article on how to fire bad clients.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I think that will be super valuable to our listeners. And we will include all of this, guys, in the show notes, which you can find on our website.
Nice. So that's going from powerless to overwhelmed. You ultimately have to strategically replace your worst clients, or else you'll never escape. If you want to go from overwhelmed to confident, this is ultimately about, strategically about setting boundaries with clients. It's
Okay.
not
And like what
saying,
kind of boundaries?
well, it could be a range of things. For instance, was on a call with a strategy project client, and they asked for some additional financial analysis that wasn't part of the original scope. And I knew that they benefit from it, and it was something I could do for them. And on the video call, I said, they described what they were looking for. I said, I am glad to do that. That's not part of the original scope, but it makes sense. Would you like an estimate for that? And one owner turned to the other and said, "Why can't we say that to our clients?" So
Oh,
scope, yeah. Scope is definitely one of those. It could also be about turnaround time. If you get something on a Friday and a client says, we need this by end of day today, or we need this by, Monday at 9 a.m. There are a few ways to handle that. I wouldn't recommend automatically saying, yes, we'll do that. You could say, our normal turnaround is, from what you described, we can get it to you by the end of next week, and then let them respond. You could also give them options. You could say, at our usual pace, we would get it done by the end of next week. If you absolutely need it by Monday, we'd have to charge a rush rate of an extra, I recommend 20 to 100%. Maybe yours is an extra 50%. Say, it would require an extra 50%. Do you approve that additional charge? If they say yes, great. They can get it first thing Monday, if that's even doable. And you want to push yourself or your team to get it done. Or you let them choose. And that's actually a specific tool that I've created. I call it framework. I call reason options choose. You say, hey, we'd love to do it. Our policy is this. Here are a couple options. Notably, the options are ones you're okay with them picking, and you let them choose. So those are some examples: scope, timeline, budget. If they say they
okay.
have a certain budget and you can't get it done, you might say, well, here's what we could do for that. To do everything you want, it would be this.
Okay. Okay. I'm also hearing like perhaps in the same vein, if you're getting another one might be time, like if you're getting emails on the weekend or something like that, or even in the evenings, just having clear boundaries around perhaps the times in which you respond to emails and how long it takes you to respond to an email. I know I've heard from some people that they have clients that perhaps get upset when they're not responsive within a certain time frame.
We
Even
train
if
our
that's on the weekend.
clients.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And sometimes it does make sense. For instance, some of my clients get emergency support. So, if they text me at 10 p.m. because something really bad has happened and I can help them, I will get back to them. But that's also not the norm. Or maybe it's a case where, I'm flying back from a speaking engagement or a client on site, and like the flight's getting in at midnight and I'm on, Wi-Fi on the plane and I see something, late. Well, I might be in work mode anyway. And in that case, I might say, oh, I'm currently traveling. I saw your note, wanted to get back to you.
Mm.
Uh, it's framing it as helpful to you to get
Mhm.
back to them, but also framing it's not the norm.
Yeah, yeah, I like that as well. And actually, I noted that you made a comment like that on an email that you responded to me with. And I like that because I know something that I've heard many times over the years is that every interaction we have with a client is training them whether we like it or not. So,
Absolutely.
what I'm hearing is that by getting a lot more intentional about that, about how we are framing things, how we are kind of training our client with every interaction. Is this encouraging them to do something that I don't want them to do more of? Or is this encouraging them to do something that, contributes to our mutual kind of well-being and satisfaction? That level of intentionality has a lot of power in terms of what if I'm hearing correctly, in terms of helping you feel confident and move into that confident stage. Is that
Absolutely. And if
awesome?
if, for people listening, if you're thinking, well, I like reviewing emails on Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening because that helps me get a head start for the week, or something like that. You know what? You go ahead and respond, but use Boomerang or a similar tool to send the email on so it goes out on Monday.
Yeah, when I personally was moving from a place of powerlessness through overwhelm to confident, that was actually something I did quite a bit. Now I often don't. When I put down my screens, I really put down my screens, and I think. Wednesday was my day off, and I made the mistake of checking Slack and got all caught up in things. And I was just like, "Well, what am
Uh,
I doing?" And they kind of shooed me away. But that was a little bit unusual. I knew within 10 minutes, I was like, "Oh crap, I shouldn't have done this." Uh, and
it happens,
totally,
and it's all about how we recover. And that could also include boundaries with the team too, right?
yeah,
You
absolutely.
need to get back to them, and also, I know that you really value the importance of communications. As business owners, our words have an extra impact on our team. For instance, we're working with an agency in the northeastern U.S. where, among other things, the owner would post things on Slack late at night and say, for tomorrow, blah 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 request. She thought she was saying, here's something for you to work on when you're in the office, employee, tomorrow. The
Ah.
employees, when I spoke with them and did a culture survey and then was digging in, they thought she was saying, by tomorrow morning, this should be done.
Yeah, I could. That's kind of how I would read that as well if I didn't know otherwise.
Yeah. So my communication to her was, clarify to work on tomorrow. Or, I sent some requests to team members, where like they were on vacation, but I wasn't. I said, for when you're back, blah, blah date, please review this. So like if they happen to check their email, I wasn't expecting them to do it. And I was making it clear.
And that level of clarity. So I'm really excited to hear about the shift from confident to valued as well. But I want to dig in.
Yes.
I think
Uh-huh.
these shifts are where a lot of people are at. So I want to dig in a little bit more. You're talking a lot about what we at Anansi call process, and this is what we absolutely love. It's our bread and butter. How to make systems that support your overall effectiveness, how to communicate and frame things effectively with people. But you also mentioned that pipeline is really huge. So I'm curious, how does the agency satisfaction index tie into profitability? Are the two kind of directly related or correlated? Can you be profitable or unprofitable at any stage? And what happens as you start to kind of move through these stages and the makeup of your clients changes? How does that kind of affect things?
It is at a minimum correlated. So the higher you go on the agency satisfaction index, odds are your profits are going up. And if we think when you're powerless, you're saying yes to anything. Scope creep is the default rather than the exception. And you also don't feel like you can charge enough because you're feeling really desperate, right? You're powerless in the
Mm.
relationships. When you get to overwhelmed and things are getting somewhat better, you don't feel like you have to take every single terrible client when you're overwhelmed. You're noticing red flags and you feel, okay enough to say no. That's going to help your profitability.
For sure.
When
But
you,
I'm curious,
yeah,
what if you discover that your existing pipeline, is in the wrong direction in terms of where you want to go? Maybe you're very, very popular as a generalist with all these different clients from all these different places, and you want
yeah.
to, niche down. I think that that's a particular context that we've probably spoken about before. But,
Mhm.
what if you're in kind of, you're going in the wrong direction? Maybe you're in the right niche, but the people that you're bringing in and that you have all your marketing efforts directed towards are not aligned with the people who respect you and ultimately allow you to feel confident and valued.
That's ultimately about creating two different pipelines. So you say you're niching on a particular industry or a particular area, and then you've got the generalist clients that are coming to you from your past reputation. My recommendation would be focus your active marketing efforts on the new niche, so that your content is focused there. If you're doing pay-per-click ads, focus there. if you're doing speaking, other thought leadership, focus your most active efforts on the niche. But that doesn't mean you have to stop talking to everyone who's referred to you on the generalist side. But I would minimize your active efforts in soliciting more generalist clients. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. But what if, what if the good clients and the bad clients, so to speak, are within the same niche?
Hmm. I mean, if you're attracting both good and bad clients, it sounds like your marketing is not focused enough. The way one agency owner put it, worked with a few years ago, he said that their old office, which was in the basement of a building, like it was a nice location, but the office was it was okay, but it sort of made people think twice. He said the problem they ran into was that the office tended to attract half of the wrong people and repel half of the right people.
Ah,
He later moved to an office that was not in a basement, and that made a big difference. So if you're attracting people who aren't a good fit, I would recommend building in, I think of it as fast failure, building a fast failure sales process. So, maybe they'd love to work with you, but they don't have any money. In that case, either identify a lower priced option with a lower scope,
hmm
or figure that out early on, in your initial email or your contact form, or somewhere you can say, hey, that sounds like a fit. Clients typically invest between this and that amount. Would it make sense to speak further?
Okay. So basically, once again, framing things and setting up expectations ahead of time so that you can kind of capture or identify the people who aren't a good fit. So if I kind of work backwards from that, if you've gone through, let's say, your exercise in terms of identifying who are, the best clients and the worst clients and the people in
Hmm.
between, et cetera,
Yeah.
you might identify patterns in both of those. And, if not your specific marketing, although it sounds like it starts there, through your qualification process, it sounds like you want to kind of use those identified patterns to either, as you said, if it's simply a matter of cost, you can potentially shift your offerings a little bit, but you can also use those same techniques to kind of screen the people that maybe aren't as good of a fit by putting in some kind of fail safes or questions or things to look for that will point out those red flags to you. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
It is, and making sure that if you do offer a lower priced option, make sure that people are clear on the difference in experience and sort of how that works.
Mm,
If someone is a coaching client or they're doing an agency roadmap strategy project with me, it's a boutique experience. It's like, in it to win it. If someone is doing a one-off call, like I'm still going to take good care of them, but they're not getting the all-encompassing, you know, text me at 10 p.m. with an emergency and I'll get right back to you.
mhm,
It's different. So make
mm.
sure that if you do have a lower priced option, people understand the difference in scope and experience so that they don't expect, you know, the $1 million service for the $10 budget.
Right. That makes sense. And then there's, of course, things that you can do and implement to support that. But I'm also quite curious now, if someone is new in business,
Uh-huh.
either brand new or maybe, they have been in business only for a few years, is it possible to start in, say, the confident place? Do you necessarily need to go through the powerless and overwhelmed stages, or can you pass through them kind of rapidly? Or, how long do people typically spend in these stages?
Well, I'd say you could start in confident if you are really good at sales and or are coming in with some sort of existing client base. So I was speaking with an agency owner earlier this week who had sold her previous agency, was a 50-50 partner. And part of the deal in the sale was that she brought several clients with her to her new firm. So she is a startup, but she's already got an existing client base. She still needs to grow further based on her goals. That helps. When I started what's now Sakas and Company, I recruited my then boss as my first client. That helped give me the confidence that, like, okay, I've got a guaranteed level of initial revenue. Not enough to cover everything, but enough to give me the confidence to build that runway. So I'd say the stronger you are at sales and whether you can bring in an existing client base, assuming you're not violating any sort of non-solicitation deals. You could start in confident. I would say, though, if you've started from scratch and you're in powerless or overwhelmed, like either of them, longer than a year or two, you're in trouble.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. I have more things I'm curious about to dig into.
Yeah,
but I also want to respect your time here.
I'm glad to share. What can I help with?
So, what if what I'm hearing, about you being, let's say, someone just started a new business. They're maybe like 2 years old. They have gotten out of the powerless stage. They're feeling overwhelmed, but maybe they're not so good at sales. How do you kind of bridge that gap if you don't have the pipeline? I think a lot of our listeners do, but we do have people as well who are still kind of struggling to find leads, and et cetera. I'm curious, are there any, how do you bridge that gap?
It's challenging if you're an agency owner who hates sales, because someone has to be selling. Sales is the hardest role to outsource to an employee or to someone other than you, because no one is going to sell, sort of believe in the product as much as you do. And I mean, there's some extreme cases. Client was hiring a salesperson. I was working with the client on some other things, but they were like, oh, by the way, here we have a finalist. We love them. We've done the video interview. We're getting ready to fly them in. Let me know if you have any questions. Not the original mandate, but within an hour, I concluded that this candidate was almost certainly a pathological liar.
Oh,
that his whole story was a sham, and indeed, I turned those findings over to the agency owner. She sort of pulled on that thread, and his whole story unraveled. They were about to fly him in, and they probably would have hired him.
Wow, yeah.
Yet he could have put them out of business.
Yeah, that's scary. As someone who has hired an account manager / salesperson in the last 6 months to a year, that is that's a scary story.
Something you can do is build what I call a new hire ramp up plan, and I'll share an article on my link for an article on that. I have 7 different sample new hire ramp up plans based on different roles. Sales is one of them. Marketing manager is another. Account manager, strategist, PM, so on. And the idea is that you can say, here's what we need from you in month 1. Here's what we need in month 2, 3, so on for the first year or so. That way, if they are nowhere near their goals for month 2, they are probably not magically going to be doing great at month 12. Worked with a client who had said, my salesperson, hired him a year and a half ago. He's not hitting his quota. And I said, oh, okay. How long has he been missing his quota? And she said, well, the whole time. That's tough. I mean, you don't want to get into a situation like that. But, it's easy to happen if you're not paying attention. So, having that new hire ramp up plan for any role helps reduce the risk. But sales in general is tough because people are good at selling themselves, not necessarily at selling your agency services. So if you can, ideally, I would find ways to outsource everything other than sales. If you absolutely have to outsource sales to hire someone else, definitely have a new hire ramp-up plan and be ready that you can't totally get rid of sales. You need to be the sales manager, meeting with your salesperson every week to review their progress, to review the pipeline, keep an eye on their activities, not just the results. It's like, are they making the calls? Are they sending the proposals? You don't want them sending proposals, to unsuitable fits. But if, for instance, it's been a month of weekly sales meetings and they have not sent a single proposal, that's a sign that you're not closing. Yeah. So part of it, again, is a mindset thing. I mean, if you had told me, when I was graduating from college, 22, that at 37 now, part of my job would be doing sales, I wouldn't have liked that, because I don't see myself as a salesperson, though I guess that probably helps, right? Because it's all consultative. I think of myself as an advisor. And so even in a sales call, part of the advice is sorting out, does it make sense for both of us or all of us, if it's multiple partners of the agency, to work together? There are a lot of books on sales. Consider looking into some, if you're reluctant about sales, on consultative sales, because that's ultimately where your agency, should focus. It's about how can you help them, not pushing, something they don't need. It's not like going to, I think they're no longer in business, but to Radio Shack. You walk into the electronics store and that someone is going to try to push something on you. And I'm like, I just need batteries. Like, I'm just here for batteries. And they're like, oh, well, have you signed up for the whatever? Have you checked out the new, kind of thing? As opposed to, say, you go to the Apple store where employees are not commission based, they're there to help. Like, you are there to help. And sometimes that includes, with that fast failure mindset, that includes pointing them elsewhere. I have an article coming up about the idea of the honest salesperson, which everyone should be an honest salesperson. But, sometimes that means downselling them to something less expensive. Sometimes that means pointing them elsewhere. Congrats. You just got things sorted out in one phone call rather than drawing it out for months before realizing things weren't a fit. Fast failure really helps.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what I'm hearing is basically that the sales and marketing and pipeline element is critical if you are a new business in order to be able to confidently exist at the confident stage, so to speak. Because otherwise, the financial pressure might be such that, you do have to work more hours or, take on clients that aren't ideal or et cetera. And that if you yourself aren't really super sales oriented, then either, kind of suck it up maybe isn't super pretty, but do what you need to do to nurture that within yourself. And your recommendation is pursuing a consultative sales approach and resources, which makes a lot of sense for me. That was really the difference for me in terms of embracing sales, is realizing exactly what you said. I'm there basically to have cool conversations with cool people and assess whether we can help each other and let them know honestly if they can't, and maybe point them towards someone else who can, or the best way that we can help each other if we are a good fit. But also that if you that really isn't your jam, hire, but know that hiring can and probably will be a fraught and difficult enterprise, both in the process and in the selection and training. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? And of course, there are ways to mitigate that, which you will share some.
Right. Well, and ultimately, if you're hiring a salesperson, it's about a short leash. Don't wait a year and a half to realize, oh, wait, they're not selling anything. We're not selling enough. Yeah. So new hire ramp up plan comes in handy. There's also a concept or a concept called extreme referencing, which is basically digging further. We'll find the link for that as well from a venture capital firm. If it's a scenario where you don't know immediately if someone's producing, like if you hire a writer, you know pretty quickly if they're good at what they do. Hiring a salesperson or a marketing person, there are a lot of reasonable excuses that eventually turn into unreasonable excuses. But you know what? If you talk to a bunch of people they've worked with before who do not have an incentive to lie about their current behavior, about the candidate's current behavior, and you're hearing a consistent story from everyone they've worked with before, that's pretty promising.
Yeah, totally. I'm also hearing that this ramp up plan could be quite valuable for you. I know for us as a business, switching from, having, 2 to 3 people doing all of the marketing and sales and most of the delivery to, having a more mature team, bringing on a salesperson and account manager made us far, far, far more aware of where and how we're getting our leads.
Right.
And one of the things that I find really appealing about this ramp up plan is that it allows you to be accountable for what that's looking like as well. Because, in terms of different people that you're hiring, some people in sales are people who kind of go out and get leads and find leads as part of their job. And
Yep.
some people's job is primarily more about nurturing. I know the analogy I've heard is kind of there are hunters and there are gatherers
Yep.
when it comes to sales. And, that's a consideration to make as well. Some of the things that I hear all the time is, leads. It's all about leads, the right leads, more leads, but sometimes less leads if you're at capacity. What I'm hearing here is that it's important to be very accountable for the numbers, very accountable for the results that you expect, and make that an intentional thing that you're looking at and working through on a regular basis, not just kind of twiddling your thumbs in hope that things will just work out. Is that what I'm hearing?
Hope is not a good plan. I mean,
Quality, but
yeah, hope is good, but when it comes to your financial future, if you run an agency and you're running an independent agency, which is my specialty, your agency is likely your number one financial asset. Like, what else out of your financial assets? If you whether you plan to sell your agency or not, what else is something you could sell for $1 million+? Or, regardless of whether you sell, what else is giving you a six-figure salary plus potentially 20 to 30% net margins every year for as long as you want it? Probably nothing else. So don't rely on happy accidents. And ultimately, that's ultimately the focus of my work. Where agencies have been doing well so far, but realized, okay, we need to get serious about things, or we've tried different things, but it's not working yet, and people want to stop relying on happy accidents.
Yeah, happy accidents. They're great when they happen, especially at the beginning. But what I'm hearing from you is, happy accidents are not a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. And if you want to move into an area of being confident, being able to confidently rely on your business to support you, then that is something that you're going to have to move away from and take that risk. Embrace the positive uncertainty, so to speak, and
Exactly.
probably iteration as well.
Yes.
If my experience says anything.
Yes. Now, if someone listening is a completionist, I can share about that final stage, how to go from confident to valued.
Yes. I would love to hear that, actually. And then we'll probably start to wind down after that.
Yeah. Well, going from confident to valued is ultimately about creating the right services mix. That is, what are the services you're offering your clients? Do clients see you as a trusted advisor, as the saying goes, or do they see you as an order taker? And also, do your services fit together in a strategic way, or is it all just kind of a, discombobulated situation? For some ideas on that, I have identified an agency services framework that I call Think, Teach, Do. Think is about strategy, where client says, I don't know what to do, tell me what to do. Teach is about training and empowerment, where your client is saying, I want to do it in-house, show me how, or maybe help me hire the people to do it as well. So think, teach, and then do is about implementation, where client says, just do it for me. A lot of agencies feel like they're stuck doing the do work, doing implementation. Do is not inherently bad. It's typically a good volume of work. It's also an easy sale. A client comes to you saying, I need a website. I need a press release. I need a this. I need a that. They're already sold on the idea of doing that implementation thing, but they're often price shopping. So I can share the link to dig in on Think, Teach, Do to help people think about how their services fit into that today and how you can cross-sell between them and what to add in the future.
Yeah, that in particular, everything that you've mentioned, all the resources, which I think will be quite valuable. But that one in particular, I see for us, I'm just like, ooh, that sounds right up what we've been thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the related one is I dig even deeper on how to reposition yourself to become a strategy first agency. That is, someone comes to you saying, we need this implementation thing, and then you can say, well, we are strategy first. We can help you, but we need to do this, this, and this before we can do that other thing. Spoke with a client recently about that, where someone was like, basically, we need technical SEO. We've got a budget for $50,000. The agency could do it through one of their partners, but they're like, you know what? We don't want to compete on that. Our specialty is high-end branding and repositioning. So they're going to decline that smaller $50,000 project and meanwhile paint the picture of what the client could do. Imagine if XYZ, they did the rebranding and the repositioning for a much higher budget and more of an ongoing basis. And if the client says yes to, okay, we won't do the first one, but we'll do the bigger one, great. If they decline, well, the agency knew in advance that the potential client wasn't going to value them enough.
Mm. Hmm. Hmm. Huh. That's really awesome. That's I can see that might be quite tempting to kind of like race ahead to those sorts of decisions. But I like the way that you've presented it here as a framework where it really is kind of step by step. Like you move through this and you move up and kind of see the results as you do. Now, I do want to make sure that we have time for our lightning round here before we close up. So I have 3 questions for you. Are you ready to answer?
I am ready.
Awesome. Okay, so first question, what is the thing that really gets you up in the morning?
Well, the alarm clock, that helps. But ultimately, hearing positive feedback from clients, like a client said, she's really stressed out. And at the end of the call, I checked in. She said that I'd helped her calm the chaos. I loved hearing that. Or another client said, some of my clients refer to me as their agency therapist, said that in our work together, and I clarify, I'm not an actual therapist, just, but that he had actually freed up time in his through coaching with me. He had freed up time in his actual therapy sessions because he wasn't having to talk about the business all the time. So that was nice to hear. So it's nice to hear the impact and hearing how I'm helping people grow their agency as their typically number one financial asset. And I just have clients I like working with.
I definitely relate to that. And definitely in my own coaching work, there's such a powerful satisfaction from seeing that change and that result and just, knowing that they have the power to do it. It's great. But what is the number one thing that you do to preserve your wellness?
Reserving time in my calendar for self-care. So that includes, meeting with my personal trainer, doing therapy, meeting with my own coach. Also, I've realized I'm more of a night owl than an early bird. So I schedule meetings accordingly. I also generally don't schedule meetings for, late on Friday afternoon because, just not there,
Yeah.
So I think the big thing is self-awareness, but then operationalizing it, dare I say, as a former operations director, operationalizing it by putting it in the calendar. And so actually at the beginning of each year, one of my team members will block in my calendar for the whole year. So it's like, I don't know exactly what I'm doing the week of, November such and such of next year, but I know that certain things will be happening. And so put the holds in.
That makes a lot of sense. I really like that. That's definitely been very powerful for me as well. The combination of number 1, self-awareness, number 2, operationalizing it, and just to get a bit more specific, putting it into the freaking calendar, scheduling your time off.
Yes.
All right. And last question, what is the weirdest habit that you have that contributes to your success?
The weirdest habit that I have, something unusual, and whether it's weird or not. I read about a mobile app a few years ago, the New York Times. The app is called We Croak. So the premise is that in Bhutan, the idea of contemplating death 5 times a day brings happiness. And so 5 times a day, random times throughout the day on the app, it pops up and it has a quote about death, dying, or sort of related topics. And It seems maybe counterintuitive, but getting the reminder puts whatever is happening in that moment into perspective.
Huh.
We
That
croak.
we croak. Huh.
Yes.
Awesome. That is not what I was expecting to hear, which is always what I like to get out of these questions. But that is really cool. I like that, being reminded of your own mortality
Yes.
and helping you be more mindful and present because of it. Awesome. Well, before we close out for today, and this has been an excellent interview. In terms of pure value, just your words alone have been just absolutely amazing. And then all of the resources, I really, really appreciate the amount of content that you have and the quality and effectiveness of it, where it's all tied in and you have all these different tools. So very, very cool. But
Thank you.
why don't you tell the audience about where they can find out more about you, where they can check out anything else on top of all of that you might have for them?
Absolutely. Well, if you're active on Twitter, I am Karl Sakas on Twitter. That's Karl, S as in Sam, AKAS, at Karl Sakas. If you are looking for ongoing business advice, my newsletter goes out twice a week, two core tips every week. You can sign up for that if you go to sakasandcompany.com. That's SAKASAND, the word company.com. Click to sign up for the newsletter. You can get that. Several agency owners have said that is one of the only emails they get that they read every time.
That's a compliment.
Yeah. So all kinds of free resources, hundreds and hundreds of articles. And if you're looking for advice on a specific thing and you can't find it, go ahead and sign up and then reply, and I'm glad to point you to something if you're trying to figure out a particular challenge.
Excellent. That sounds great. I know that will be super valuable for our listeners, especially ones who perhaps have specific problems and not a ton of time to dig. That being said, though, we will, as usual, link to all of this on the show notes page. If you go to www.anansicontent.com/podcast, Anansi being ANANSICONTEN.com. Awesome. Well, thank you, Karl. This has been really, really incredible. I'll definitely be following up with you to get all of those different resources. And, this is a conversation that I might love to continue in the future. I know you have lots of other valuable stuff to talk about that our listeners would appreciate.
Well, thanks for having me. Glad to help.
Awesome. I hope you have an excellent rest of your day, and the same to you, our wonderful listeners. And that does it for another amazing episode of the Say It Online podcast. Join us next week. And don't forget to like and subscribe, whether it's iTunes, whatever your favorite podcast player is. It is always, always appreciated. It really makes a difference for us. It helps us get this word out to more people. As always, this episode was brought to you by our sponsor and Say's own business, Anansi Content. If you're a digital agency owner and you're still wasting too much time chasing down content that maybe isn't even all that great, let's talk. We've spent years working on the best process for selling, planning, and delivering amazing conversion content for your client projects. Better yet, we moosh our process to yours so that your client and you have a seamless and amazing experience the entire time through. If you're interested, just go to our website. That's www.anansicontent.com. That's ANANSI content.com. And just click Let's Talk. I'd love to chat with you. Someone else on the team would also love to chat with you too. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day.